Hello everyone, welcome to another video. And in this video, we are basically going to talk about chapter number 17. Uh, and if you remember that we were discussing about pessimism in the last chapter and why people give more attention to pessimism rather than optimism. And we have looked at a few reasons in the previous video, and in this video, we're going to look at the last reason, which is basically progress usually happens too slow to notice, but while setbacks happen too quick to ignore. And the same thing could be said about tragedies. Tragedies very oftenly happen overnight, but when it comes to miracles, they don't happen overnight as much as tragedies, right? We're going to look at the story of the Wright brothers, the brothers who basically did the first human flight. And before the success, there were a few articles in the press related to flying, and specifically there was an article released in the Detroit Free Press, which was basically kind of like taunting the human dream of flight, and they would say that it's basically practically impossible. And there were a few reasons, like why were they thinking like that. One of the reasons was that whether it is actually technically possible for humans to fly. So they said, like, for a working flight machine, um, if you were to calculate the weight of that machine, it would be at least 300 to 400 pounds, and considering the weight of the equipment and also the weight of the person who's going to be flying it, right? But if you look at if you look in nature, then the heaviest animal that can fly is probably 50 pounds. So compare that to 300 to 400 pounds for a basic flying machine. So this seemed impossible, and the reason they were giving was that if nature couldn't succeed in making heavier objects fly, then it's basically no point in trying as well. But if you look at the most important inventions that happened in the 20th century, then I think flying would be one of the top five, if not the first one. This invention actually kind of like started wars. It also helped ending wars, and as we all know, it played a big role in bridging the gap between different countries, and that is the reason that we have such a connected world that we have now. Um, so the thing is, even after the Wright brothers succeeded in their human flight, nobody actually seemed to pay too much attention to it. They basically thought it was a trick. It would be similar to something like telepathy. Like if someone tells you right now that I can teleport from one place to another, then you would say it's basically a trick. Nothing like that can actually happen, right? So that was the people's reaction back then when they saw the Wright brothers flying. Um, so it took some time for people to actually pay attention to it. Exactly, almost around 5 years, it took people to notice what the Wright brothers were doing. And then what happened is the media actually sent reporters to overlook what the Wright brothers were doing. And those reporters actually reported back, of course, to the editors, and this became public knowledge, and people started to actually acknowledge that human flight is possible. But even then, people were still a little bit skeptical. They were skeptical in the sense, like they were skeptical about the usage of the airplane. They would think that it's going to be used only for military purposes. It's going to be probably just going to be a rich person's toy, and it would never be able to carry heavy loads. At that time, most of the freight carriage was done through sea, and people were saying that it's not going to be possible to carry heavier loads through air. But surprisingly, after 6 months, there was a first commercial, or like a freight delivery through air. So yeah. So the thing here is that it took people years to be optimistic about the flight, about the possibility of humans flying. But the thing is, people quickly pay attention to drivers of pessimism. People pay more attention to wars, they pay more attention to bankruptcy and other things, other negative things. So the point is, it's easier to create a narrative. It's easier to create a narrative around pessimism, um, because the stories tend to be more fresh and they're more recent actually. But on the other hand, optimism actually requires us to look at a longer stretch of history and developments. And these things in itself are not easy to do. Looking at the history and also the developments, and also to accumulate that data, that it actually makes sense. It's a little bit hard to do that. To explain this further, we can look at the example of medicine, like how much medicine has made progress over the last decades, right? Years. So the thing is, if you look at the last year, you might not see many significant improvements in medicine. Even if you go back 10 years back, then you would also probably might not find something revolutionary. But if you look at, for example, at the last 50 years, then you will find that the medicine has actually made a huge progress. We can look at the example of deaths by heart diseases. So the number has actually reduced 70% in the last 50 years, which is a big number. And if you look at only in the US, then it would be like probably millions of people that are saved every year because of the improvement in medicine. But this thing tends to go unnoticed because it's over the longer period, and it's hard to actually comprehend it. So the point again is, slow progress always gets less attention, and the same thing happens with companies. It takes years to for a company to be viewed as valuable, while if something has to go wrong, then that company can basically shut down in a few days or something. Same thing happens with stock market as well. If there is a 40% decline, then everybody would be paying attention to it. There might be like congressional meetings about why the stock market has actually declined 40%. But if you talk about the 140% gain that the market gets over the period of 5-6 years, then that thing actually goes unnoticed. And then if you look at the reputation that people build in their careers, it takes years and decades to build that, but it can all be destroyed by just a single email. And we all know about Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking was a famous astrophysicist, and he made some really significant discoveries. So he was actually being interviewed by Times Magazine when he was actually selling some books that he wrote to um, to the normal people. And someone asked him, like, how do you actually keep yourself so much positive despite your condition? Because he wasn't able to even talk. He used to use a computer to communicate. So to that he said that he did not actually had any hopes at the time when he contracted that disease. He was actually 21. So he said, like, anything that I can do despite my condition is basically a plus. And probably this is the reason that we actually give more importance to pessimism. For example, I mean, if I am expecting the best case scenario, then it is kind of flat. There is no excitement to it, right? But if I am a little bit pessimistic, and I am kind of like expecting not the worst, but maybe not the best as well, for example, right? Then from that point of expectation, if anything good happens, then I'm gonna be more happier than rather than just always hoping for the best, right? So this is probably one of the reasons as well that we prefer pessimism. Yeah. So hopefully you learned something in this video. We are closing to the end of the book, Psychology of Money. I think there are only three chapters remaining, so there are going to be like 5-6 more videos, and hopefully you learned something. And I will see you in the next one. Ciao.